The Global Energy Leaders Podcast, Episode 19.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray, where we talk to the biggest names in energy, and today is no exception. If you remember on the show, I mentioned going to Zambia last summer. I'm on a trip. I went to Zambia and to South Africa and was attending the Power Africa conference there in Livingstone, Zambia, and had the great honor of meeting a lot of energy professionals. And one of them we brought on today, and we're going to talk about energy issues in Africa and the Power Africa initiative and what's going on with that, and also the Power Africa conference, which is coming up in Ghana in just a few months. And we'll link to all of that information in the show notes. So without further ado, here is my guest, Urenna Onyewuchi. Well, it is so good to have you on the show today. The last time I saw you, I hope you remember this. I don't know how you could forget it. We were in a little car, if you want to call it that, held by a cable going at what had to be, I don't know, it felt like a straight down to our death to go tour this power plant. And as I was thinking about this interview, and I remember us standing there at the ledge in Zambia, and I'll try to post a picture or something on LinkedIn just to, to kind of let the audience see what was going on. I remember us going, what happened to the elevator? What happened to the elevator? Because we're supposed to take an elevator down. And then the worker comes up and he goes, it was, 175 feet to the bottom or something like that? And the worker comes up and goes, yeah, the elevator's broke now. It gets stuck a lot. And we go, okay, that car's not so bad. So that's the last time I saw you. We survived, and we both made it back to your stateside.
It was quite an adventure.
So how has it been going the last few months? Everything going well since you've got back from Zambia, which was a great time, and now we're getting ready for Ghana, correct?
That's correct. Everything's going well, between work and providing some guidance and leadership for Power Africa. I think, things are moving nicely, I would say.
Well, let's talk about Power Africa, because that's why we have you on. You're so knowledgeable about this topic. What kind of got this initiative started? Let's just take it from the beginning. What got this initiative started, and then how did you get involved?
Okay, well, the initiative is from IEEE-PES, which is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and the Power and Energy Society of IEEE. In the past, I think in the years 2000 and 2009 or so a long time ago, they had planned and hosted Power Africa conferences, and they were both in South Africa. And PES was thinking about revitalizing or, revamping their Africa initiatives and the Power Africa conference. I think part of it was also in line with Obama's administration and U.S. aid having the Power Africa initiative as well. So it seems like a lot of organizations and people were looking to go into Africa again to help with power in general. And so I had worked with a professor who knew that I had a lot of passion for Africa and improving power in Africa. And also because of I guess I would say I did really well in school. So I guess the feeling was that I could be trusted to host this thing and have the integrity to pull through what I said I was going to. And so that's kind of how I got connected into IEEE-PES and this initiative. So it was a perfect blend and perfect match for my interests and my background as well. So that's kind of how I got into it. Power Africa it's huge. I think that you have the initiative from U.S. aid, but I think what IEEE-PES brings to the table, or one of the things that it brings to the table that others do not have, is the fact that the Power and Energy Society is over 125 years old. They've been doing power for a very long time. You have American investors like Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla and all these people who really changed the face of electricity in the world, who were affiliated with the society. And so having the society take part in what's going on in Africa is amazing. So I have huge expectations for what we can do and what we will be doing in Africa.
Yeah, and just to follow up on some of the things you said there, is one of the things that I was impressed with was the conference in Zambia. It was truly a global conference. It was a small group. It wasn't a large 5,000-10,000 type conference, but the group that was there was very diverse. They represented all kinds of different industry products as far as energy is concerned, different educational backgrounds, different political agendas, and so this is really an ecumenical movement that we're seeing to kind of get this initiative brought into the spotlight, if you will.
Yes, and I like that you call it a movement, and that's kind of how I see it is over time the number is going to grow, but one of the things that we wanted to make sure of was that the quality of the conference stays strong, whether we have 400 people or 600 or 1,000, that whoever comes leaves with something key. And it was awesome getting the feedback at the end of the conference and during the conference of how people felt like this was such an amazing opportunity, what they learned, as well as the networking that they did. So you have people from African Development Bank, you have people from manufacturing, you have people from the utility. So you really got to meet and touch on different aspects of power in Africa. And I know that that's going to continue over the years as we continue to host these conferences and we expand, big, because it's not just about the technical people or the power experts, but you have regulation has to come in place. You have financing. So there are several aspects that are required for the power infrastructure in Africa to improve.
Yeah, and being small or big, is really, like I say to people when they're talking about putting on network events, it's about, at the end of the day, it's really, these conferences, they're about networking on some level because we all are trying to understand this world better, and so we need to meet people like yourself. And so now I left that conference with two good connections, yourself, and if you remember the providential minister that was there, me and him still are in contact, and so that's a good contact for me. And then on top of that, I got access to all of the white papers that were presented, and so I could download those and read them whenever I wanted to, and there was tons and tons and tons of information there. So y'all really hit two things. I thought the networking was solid because it was a small group compared to some of these big events where there's so many people. But the other thing is you gave us access to all of the presentations, so you couldn't be at all of them, and even if you were, they were so technical that it would be hard to kind of track everything that was said. So that was a lot of value there, and so I enjoyed it. I don't know if I'll be able to go to Ghana this year or not, but I enjoyed it. But let's just talk about the thought process of Power Africa, because I posted on social media while I was there a statistic for how many people in Zambia, I think there was a talk, that didn't have access to power. Can you just kind of walk us through, maybe from a standpoint of an American mindset, we don't really think about people not having power, but that's a big problem in Africa, no matter what nation you go to. So could you kind of walk us through just that mindset of why this is important, and maybe, as Americans, we've kind of missed that. Hey, we need to think about getting these people access to what we consider just basic necessities.
Correct. I think the numbers that have been published are that about two-thirds of Africans do not have access to electricity. That's two-thirds. That's over half of the continent does not have access to electricity. There's a map out there that shows it's on looking at the world lighted and I would say lit. And when you look at the map, you see that, you have light bulbs in a lot of places around the world, but in Africa, it's very, very sparse, which is really sad. You have countries like Nigeria that is right now the largest economy in Africa. And I believe that it's 50% of people in Nigeria that have access to electricity. In Zambia, I want to say the number is about 28 or 30% of Zambians have access to electricity. And this hurts a lot because this impacts education and safety and security. Obviously, you can't have kids walking around at night because of the bad things that happen. You look at hospitals and healthcare and the number of infants that die, or the high mortality rates of mothers who are giving birth. Some of it because they don't have electricity. They don't, to either provide oxygen for a baby or for a mother, or just different things for surgery. So electricity, or not having access to electricity, touches on a lot of things that, that we take for granted in the U.S. here, because, we have access to electricity and we barely ever lose power. And when we do lose power for a short amount of time during storms or so on, people get very angry. But we have to understand that in a lot of places in Africa, it is quite a luxury, and because the power infrastructure is not there, from a grid, a lot of people have to purchase diesel generators, which bring in other challenges. You have every single year we read on the news people who die from smoke inhalation because they were not thinking and put the generators inside their houses and fell asleep and, just never got up because of the carbon monoxide. And then you have the noise pollution. So just all these things that just comes from not having the right access to electricity. So it's a huge problem, and it's something that we need to try to fix as soon as possible.
And, I pulled that map up while you were talking because I'd forgotten about that map. I hadn't seen it in so long, and it is astonishing. You look at, I will see if I can link to this in the show notes as well for the audience, but if you look at, kind of our, Nevada and Arizona and Utah and Colorado areas that there's a lot of there's a lot of open land there. Wyoming, even that seems to have more power than most of Africa does because there's only a few spots that you see it. And I had forgotten about it, just how starkly different that map. So I'm glad you brought that up because it is. Yeah. And when we think about energy, one of the things here stateside and globally as well is the debate about energy gets so politicized. And, it's, there's climate change and carbon emissions and all this stuff gets brought up. But one of the things that you touched on that's very important, I think that we as energy professionals need to remember is energy saves lives. And so there are babies who are being born in Africa right now who don't have access to the basic energy needs to run the equipment that would save their lives. And so it is a humanitarian effort apart from everything else to get energy to these people because they need it. It's a basic necessity. So I'm glad you touched on just the humanitarian aspect of it because we think about it so often, stateside at least, as a political thing, a debate over should we use coal or wind or solar or whatever. I mean, and we need to step back and say this is a humanitarian effort that we're trying to help extend life expectancy. We don't want mothers that are losing their babies over something that we could fix here simply in the States because they don't have access to the basic necessities. So thank you for that point. The other thing I wanted to talk about was when we think about Africa in these opportunities, there's a lot of initiatives. So you see the World Bank's pumping in money. You mentioned the U.S. is involved. There's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs out there because a lot of these problems that we're looking at when we go to these Power Africa conferences, they're not exactly solved. We're still in the early stages of saying, okay, we know we want to do this, but we're really trying to get here. And so it seems to me that from what little interest I have in Africa, which is mainly South Africa and those southern nations, is that there's a lot of opportunity for the entrepreneur to get involved in movements like this and initiatives like Power Africa. Correct?
Yes. I would say that there are opportunities, but then I think the challenge comes around regulation and structure. Regulation because it almost seems that with a lot of governments in Africa, and I'm guessing probably other parts of the world as well, just in a different way, is that those who are running the countries want to figure out a way to make money off of whoever is coming in, and so I feel like there are oftentimes roadblocks in there to ensure that there is some kind of a middleman who takes something from you as you're making money on power. So, you have that challenge. You also have the challenge of vested interests, those who do not want power to get better in Africa because of, the amount of money that they're making on diesel generators, on the diesel that you use to feed the generators. So there are roadblocks that are put in place that makes things more challenging for entrepreneurs and businessmen coming in. However, those opportunities are there, and it's really about people going in and learning the culture and learning how things work, and then figuring out how to enter into that space. There are quite a good number of international companies and not-for-profits and so on that are in Africa right now. Some of them have been there for a while, some of them are new. But again, there are opportunities there. It's all about the right person going in and understanding how things work and kind of, jumping on it. Because if you look at telecommunications industry in Africa, it grew exponentially. Like nobody saw it coming, but it was something where a number of entrepreneurs came in and they saw an opportunity and they jumped on it. And of course, when the first person went in, another person came in and said there was competition, and a third person, and you see how just telecommunications in Africa has just changed. Just about everybody has a mobile phone, and while everyone might not have access to internet, they can get it. If they wanted to, if they saved enough money, they could buy or purchase the data plans, and that could happen for power if we know how to enter into the market the right way.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to transition here, and we'll let you go here in just a second. Let's talk about the Ghana event. What should people expect that may want to come? And I want to encourage everybody, this is, we do on the show a conference edition. This is not a conference edition. This is about the Power Africa initiative that we and you were involved with. We think it's important. So we want to talk about that. But I do want to talk about the Ghana event because it is coming up in June. Right. And so it's coming up, and it's a great event to go. And like I said, you get to meet some good people. And if you're not an electrical engineer or whatever, I'm not an electrical engineer. I went, and I had a great time. I met a lot of people there. I learned from them, and so it was good from that standpoint to network. And like I said, y'all gave us all the white papers, which was just spectacular. So I go back and I could re-examine that stuff. So what should they expect this year? Who are some of the people that will be speaking? And just tell us a little bit about the event.
So this one is the conference in June in Ghana is on harnessing ICT, the information communications technologies in electrifying Africa. So we're looking at communications technologies like smart metering and making good use of the Ethernet and internet to collect the right amount of data and make decisions around electrifying Africa. So we're touching on ICT, we're touching electrification and just everything around that. Similar to the 2016 conference, we still want to make sure to touch on the, in a sense, non-technical aspects. So humanitarian aspects, case studies, what are the success stories around the world where electrification and use of ICT is concerned, and so on and so forth. So we're probably going to have professors speaking. We're going to have NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are involved in either bringing solar power or whatever to Africa. I think we're going to be working again with the IEEE Smart Village, which trains seeks and trains ambassadors around Africa and around other developing countries to learn how to have a solar village or community-based electrification, basically. So we'll have the same types of speakers that we had in 2016. And again, just highlighting that the networking is probably the most important aspect of the conference. But like you mentioned, the technical side of having access to the papers, going to the paper sessions, listening in on the panels, and just going from there. I think lots of ideas came from this conference. The other thing too that most people don't see is, while a lot of people attend the conference, a lot of work goes into planning these conferences, and what we're doing actually is creating a pipeline of leaders. So what I'm doing with the conference is that for every conference we'll have a new set of leaders working on bringing the conference to fruition, and it's training people on how to lead and how to create and design sessions and and workshops. And so I believe that the people who are planning this conference will be some of the greatest leaders in the next few years as we keep watching. So I think that our initiative is doing a whole lot more than the technical side of power in Africa, but also helping create leaders in Africa and for Africa.
No, that's a great point. The only thing I ask is that this year's leaders do not put people in that cable car and scare them to death, because that was
quite the adventure. That was quite the adventure.
It was quite the adventure. Now, I think I've got a picture or video or something from that, and so I will try to do it. It doesn't do it justice, though, because I come back home and I was showing people, like, yeah, it's not that bad. I'm like, you understand, you were looking, we had to put our feet up so we didn't fall through the front of the thing is what it felt like. So,
exactly.
Well, good deal. Okay.
I think that by the time we got back up, it didn't seem so bad, but going down was just incredibly scary.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I forgot to touch on is going to these conferences in Africa. I grew up in Nigeria. I spent a good number of years in Nigeria. And in my mind, every part of Africa was like Nigeria. And going to Zambia for this conference and going through South Africa made me, really realize that Africa is not, you cannot use one country to judge the entire continent. And with us moving the conference around from one location to the other, it's also getting people who are interested in not just seeing the technical side of Africa, but also want to understand what Africa is like. This gives them the opportunity. So we've gone to Zambia, and now we're going to be in Ghana, and the next conference we're going to be somewhere else. So it's also taking our members and the people who are joining us in the conferences really, in a sense, to tour Africa with us. So that's also for me, also a fun part of the conferences.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that I appreciate about this conference is, as you talk about and you move around, is Africa is so rich in culture. So if you go to Zambia, you learned about, you meet the people who are near in proximity. And then you hear about, there's these people out here that speak this language and these people out here that speak this language. And then you go to South Africa and you see that there's all these diverse people groups that are living inside these nations. And it's really fascinating. And for me, I love international travel because you go and you meet people and you hear different perspectives, and it helps you reevaluate how you look at the world, because we're always influenced by what's around us. And so when you get outside the U.S. of A. and you go and you meet people in other nations, you hear how they think about stuff, and it's helpful just to kind of reset the button and go, okay, there's some good information here. And so moving the conference around is great, because you are right. Each African nation, and even inside the nations, there's this vast cultures that are very rich that sometimes we just don't think about here in the stateside, because we're all kind of Americans, and so that's just kind of one of the things that we lose. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Okay, look, I'm going to let you go. Anything else that you want to plug or promote before we get off of here? Any way that people could connect with you or find out more about the conference?
Oh, sure. I just want to encourage people to follow us on our website and join us in Ghana for this conference. Our website for the conference is sites.ieee.org/Power Africa. So if you just Google IEEE PES Power Africa Conference Ghana, you'll find out more about the conference, and you can read more about me and what I do in my company, or the company that I work for around energy management and power quality. Again, you see me there at the conference again, and I'm looking forward to meeting up with those who join us in Ghana. Absolutely. And we will link to the conference website in the show notes as well, so everybody can just find it right there, make it easy for them. And I will see if I can find some of the old technical papers maybe, and we can link to some of those just so people can kind of see what will be presented there, because it was just some really good stuff. Thank you so much again for coming on. It was good to catch on since the last time I saw you, and I don't think I'll be able to make it to Ghana, but I'm hoping to, because I was supposed to go to Ghana last year, but plans changed. So I'm wanting to go, but if not, best wishes, and hope to talk to you before, maybe get you back on and talk about the conference. So thanks again for coming on. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Have a good one. Okay, guys, really hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll link to everything we discussed in the show notes, which you can find at globalenergymedia.com, where also you can have a chance to enter Alex Epstein's book we're giving away this month, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. And so you can kill two birds with one stone, and check out all the previous shows there as well. So next week, David Blackman's coming on, and we're going to talk about Trump and all kinds of stuff. Really good stuff there. And we are working on our 100-day roundtable to recap what President Trump has done as far as energy policy is concerned in the first 100 days.
Look forward to seeing you next week. And until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.